Hi, and welcome to our lesson for today. We are going to be practicing adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing equations. If you want to check back at our last couple of lessons, we went over adding and subtracting equations and multiplying and dividing equations, so if you need more help with that, those will be linked below. We're going to go ahead and get started with some adding and subtracting first. So we're going to use fractions. These are going to make it a little bit harder, but then we'll also be able to go over our adding and subtracting fractions rules. So what we're going to do here, we want to isolate the x, which means we want the x by itself on this side of the equation. If you remember, that means that we are going to do the opposite of whatever this is doing. So right now, this is adding onto the x, and so in order to get rid of it, we want to subtract 14/3. But the other thing is, whatever we do to one side of the equation, we also have to do to the other side. So I'm also going to have to subtract 14/3 from the other side of the equation. And so what that does is that is going to cancel this out. 14/3 minus 14/3 is 0, and x plus 0 is just x, so we've now isolated our x on the left side of the equation. Now we have to solve the right side to find out what x equals. So let's go ahead and solve this, and since I have common denominators here, okay, 3 and 3 are my common denominators, I don't have to actually change anything as far as finding a common denominator. I can just subtract my numerators. So 2 minus 14 is a negative 12, and then I'm going to keep my denominator. Now I'm not finished because I can actually reduce this fraction. And so now x is going to equal, so 12 divided by 3 is 4, and a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So there you go. Now you can always substitute this 4 into your equation and solve it and check your work. But let's go ahead and move on to the next problem. So the next one we have is p minus 18.4 equals 25.6. So using the same concepts we've been over, go ahead and pause the video and try this one by yourself. All right, let's go ahead and give it a try. So we want to get the p by itself, that's our variable, and it is p minus an 18.4, so I'm going to want to add 18.4 in order to isolate that p. Now, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So this other side, I'm also going to add 18.4. So 18.4, negative 18.4, excuse me, plus 18.4 equals 0. That cancels out. So all I'm left with on this side is p. On the other side, I'm going to add these together because they're both positive. So 6 plus 4 is 10. Carry my 1. 8, 9 plus 5 is 14. Carry my 1. 2, 3 is 4. Now my problem, since I'm adding, goes over 2 decimals. Remember, we line up the decimals when we're adding, and so I have one place after the decimal, so my answer is 44. So I can leave my answer p equals 44 and 0/10, or I can go ahead and rewrite it as p equals 44. Either one is the correct answer. All right, let's go ahead and try a couple of more. So if you struggled with either of those problems, maybe a little more practice will help you out here. So we're going to say a negative 45 equals y minus 8.3. So this one is similar to the one we just did, except now my y is on the right side. But I still want to isolate my y, so I don't really have to worry about which side of the equation it's on, as long as I get it by itself. So in order to do that, I have to do the opposite of minus 8.3, which is plus 8.3. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So I'm going to add 8.3 to both sides. Now on this side, negative 8.3 and positive 8.3 cancels. So all I'm left with on the right side is y. And then I'm going to go ahead and solve on the left side. So go ahead and solve negative 45 plus 8.3, and you can pause the video and join us back when you're finished. All right, let's see how good you are at subtracting those decimals. So if you remember, when you're adding and subtracting decimals, you have to line them up. And since I don't have anything in the tenths position here, I'm going to put a 0 so that I can actually subtract. Now I can't do 0 minus 3, so I'm going to have to borrow from the 5. So 10 minus 3 is 7. I'm going to bring my decimal straight down. I don't need to move that at all. And then I can't subtract 4 minus 8, so I'm going to borrow from the 4. So 14 minus 8 is 6. And then here I'm left with 3 minus 0, if you want to put that for a placeholder, is 3. Now I have a negative 45 and a positive 8.3. So 45 is definitely a larger number. My answer is going to be a negative 36.7. You can write it like this and leave it, or you can switch it and say y equals negative 36.7. It really doesn't matter. Both of these are the exact same answer, so it's really a matter of personal preference. Let's try another add and subtract. So I have h minus 5/6 equals 1/4. Okay, so this one is a little trickier. Go ahead and pause the video and try it on your own. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And again, we want to isolate our x, which means I have to move my 5/6. So I'm going to add 5/6, which is the opposite of subtracting it. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So this left side turns into just h because that cancels out. And then on the right side, I'm going to go ahead and have to add these together. Now, I can't add fractions without finding a common denominator. So right here between 4 and 6, my common denominator is 12. 4 times 3 is 12, so 1 times 3 is 3 in the numerator. 6 times 2 is 12, so 5 times 2 is 10 in the numerator. So now let's go ahead and add these. So I have 3 plus 10 is 13. Add my numerators, keep my denominator, which is 12. Now I can leave it like this, or I can change it to a mixed number. So most people prefer to leave it as an improper fraction. If you change it to a mixed number, you're going to say 13 divided by 12. It goes in one time. And I have 1 left over out of 12. So either of these are correct answers. Those do mean the same thing. So hopefully this little bit of practice has helped you understand with adding and subtracting when you have a variable that you're solving for. So if the number on the same side as the variable is adding, we're going to subtract it from both sides so we can cancel that out. If it's subtracting, we're going to add it to both sides to cancel it out. And you can always plug in your answer and check your work. It's not that difficult. Just take the number that you ended up with as your answer and substitute it back into the original problem for the y or whatever variable it's substituted for, and then solve the problem just like you would. And if it comes out the same on either side, then your answer is correct. Okay, let's move on to some multiplying and dividing. So these are going to also be a little bit harder than the ones we did during the lesson the other day. So if you missed that lesson, you can find the link below. And let's go ahead and get started on these multiplying and dividing practice. So first we're going to start with 12 equals 3/4 f. So I'm going to let you go ahead and pause the video and try this one on your own. All right, let's go ahead and try it. So we want to get the f by itself. And so right now I'm multiplying by 3/4, which is a fraction. And the opposite of that is actually multiplying by the reciprocal, 4/3. And here's why. 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 3 is 12. And 12 over 12 is 1. So that leaves me with f on this side of the equation. Now, whatever I do to one side, I multiplied by the reciprocal, 4/3, I'm going to have to do to the other side. So on this side, I'm also going to multiply by 4/3. So this side canceled out. So we were left with f, and then this side we're going to go ahead and solve. So 12 times 4 is 48 divided by 3. And 3 will go into 48. 16 times. So your answer is 16. Okay, so that one's pretty simple once you realize what you're supposed to do. If you did go ahead and make it a two-step problem, it would look like this. We would multiply by 4, since we're dividing by 4 on this side, and then the 4's would cancel, and 12 times 4 is 48, and that would equal 3f because we're not finished yet. And then we could divide by 3, which would mean that this cancels on this side, and f equals 16 on this side when you divide. So you still end up with the same answer. Multiplying by the reciprocal just turns that two-step process into one step. You can do it all at once, and that way you don't have to worry about all those multiple steps going on. So let's go ahead and try another one. If I have x divided by -8 equals 12. So I'm going to let you go ahead and pause the video and try this one on your own. All right, let's go ahead and try this one together. So first I need to isolate my x. My x is dividing by 8. The opposite of that is multiplying by 8. And actually, just to clarify, we are multiplying by -8 because the negative divided by negative is a positive, and we want this x to be positive. So when I divide this, -8 divided by -8 is 1, so I'm left with x on the left side. And then 12 times a -8, so 12 times 8 is 96. Negative times a positive is a negative, okay? And this one's easy, we can check it real quick. So if I have -96 divided by -8 equals 12. So 96 divided by 8 is 12, and a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so 12 does equal 12, so we are correct. So these, even though they're a little bit harder, really it's just testing more of your knowledge of multiplying and dividing with negatives and fractions, and we'll try some decimals. So let's go ahead and move on to a couple more practice problems here. So the first one we're going to go with is g divided by 5.2 equals -3. All right, go ahead and pause the video and try this one on your own. All right, so we're dividing g by 5.2, so in order to get rid of that, I'm going to do the opposite, which is multiply by 5.2. All right, so 5.2 divided by 5.2 cancels, and I'm left with g on this side. And then on the right side of the equation, I'm going to multiply 3 times 5.2. So let's just go over our multiplication rules real quick again. We're going to multiply the numbers. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 5 is 15. And then there's only one decimal place in my problem, so I'm only going to move my answer over one spot. Now, I need to double check everything because I had a negative times a positive, and a negative times a positive equals a negative. So in order to write this more streamlined, I have g equals -15.6. Okay. Let's try one more. And this one also has decimals, so don't let those trick you up. Go ahead and pause the video and solve this one by yourself. All right, let's go ahead and try it together. So we have 5x equals 2.5. So I'm multiplying by 5 on this left side. If I want to get the x by itself, I'm going to have to divide by 5. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. So 1x is just x. And then 2.5 divided by 5, if I want to write it out, again, bring your decimal straight up. 5 goes into 25 5 times. Okay, now I have 0.5. And they're both positive, so my answer is positive. Well, I hope that this practice helped you with these one-step equations, because we're going to move on to multi-step equations next. So if you're interested in that, come back and check out another video, subscribe to our channel. If you like us, give us a thumbs up, and we'll see you another day. Have a great day. Bye.